Do you find it challenging to spend time with your spouse? Do you find it hard to find events to do with your spouse? Or maybe you're just in a season of life where you don't think it's important to spend time with your spouse. Well, today we're going to unpack all of the reasons why you should be spending time with your spouse and how you can improve your relationship. And by the way, I have a guest with me. So stay tuned and let's go. Welcome back to another episode of Marriage Success. And today we're going to be talking all about spending time, prioritizing that, and everything of that sort. Now, before we go too deep into the episode and start unpacking this, I do want to let you know that marriagedrills.com is the website where you can stay in touch with me. You can also send me a message in reference to topics you would like to hear covered on the podcast. And last but not least, you can sign up for one-on-one coaching if that's something you're interested in. Check out the description box or the show notes below. Now, if you have already made it this far into the episode, you realize that today is not going to be a video podcast. Today, we are going to be doing audio only for this episode and then try and get the video back up and running for next week's episode. Now, today, in the spirit of spending time with your spouse, I invited my lovely wife, Crystal, to spend time with us on the podcast and help me unpack this and really just truthfully keep me honest to the things that I talk about on the podcast, because many times I've already explained I'm not perfect, and she will probably be the first to give an amen to that. But together in our marriage, we do a really good job at loving on one another and spending time when we can find time. We are probably one of the couples that can do a little bit better with finding time to spend time. Right, honey?
Sure.
Yeah,
Can't
sure.
we all?
Yeah. So as we unpack the importance of prioritizing spending time, we're just going to talk about it and really help drive home some of the keys that, we think will help with building the success of all marriages. So the first concept that we're going to unpack is the prioritization of the time with your spouse. And, the keys here are really that there's a sacrifice of other things to ensure the priority. And, we're just going to kind of unpack that. So what were your first thoughts? Like my wife and I, we talked about this ahead of time, but what were your first thoughts when I said, hey, prioritizing time? First thing that popped into your head, what was it?
That is very important.
Very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, why is it important? Let's really unpack the significance of prioritizing time and why it's important.
I think that prioritizing time in your marriage is important because it keeps your friendship and your closeness and your connection with one another. Life will inevitably get in the way if you don't prioritize making time for one another.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. So I think it's important to just remember that you married this person, then that you love this person and you made a commitment to this person. And so you have to invest in that relationship and keep the relationship, but keep the connection alive through spending time and making new memories together.
Okay. So, making memories, and when we were actually kind of, brainstorming this, we came up with a few things. And one of those things was sacrificing other things to ensure the priority. What were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind when this was one of the subtopics under prioritizing?
Sacrifice.
Yeah, sacrifice. What are we talking about here? Because we're not talking about offering up an animal. I think we can rule that one out, right?
Let's not do that.
Okay. Now, hey, just now for all the listeners, one, I'm joking, But two, if that's what you want to do to spend time, then that's not cool.
Not cool at all.
Not cool.
When you invest in another person, it's going to cost you something, right? It's much easier just to be selfish and just look out for you. And so by getting married, hopefully we said no to that, right? But therefore, you're going to have to sometimes sacrifice something that you want to do, whether that be, financial resources, whether that be sleep, whether that be time with your friends. It costs to put your spouse first.
Yeah, it really does cost. And I think that's a good point to bring up, that we're going to sacrifice or give up time. Now, for all the husbands who have heard me talk about the attributes of love, self-giving is one of those attributes. And you're going to have to give up something in order to invest and prioritize this time that you're spending with your wife. Now, for all the ladies out there, you're also going to have to give up and prioritize your time that you spend with your husband. Now, when we were drafting this, I brought up the idea that when you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else. And the goal with the importance of prioritizing the time is that you're saying yes to your marriage, and you're saying no to all of the other things that would distract and take away. And we, my wife and I, we're not oblivious to the fact that you probably live in a season of life where spending time looks different than it did when you were newlyweds versus empty nesters versus you got toddlers versus teenagers. The gamut of life, fully understand. And maybe you're a hybrid in between where you have a newborn and you were recently an empty nester. That could be a case. Moral of the story, spending time, saying yes, and prioritizing the time that you spend with one another has got to be high on the list. Otherwise, you start to get into this mundane routine of your relationship, and that can lead to bigger problems, down the line. So,
sure,
the sacrificing there, and we talked about this, but this really touches on the basis of budgeting, right? If you're familiar with financial budgeting, well, let's talk about your resource, which is time, and how you budget that. Where on the calendar do you guys both agree that this is our time? That could be once a month. That could be once a week. I hope that it's on a weekly basis at minimum. And if you get to the point where it can be daily or maybe every other day, that's even better, because when you start to spend this time together, it builds on your rapport with one another and trust with one another. It's hard to get into a deeply committed relationship like a marriage when you don't take the time to invest with one another. So, when you say that I'm going to budget my time, then that helps with saying, hey, I know that I only have so much of this, but I'm going to safeguard this little window, whatever it may be, because my marriage matters that much. And yeah, so what would you say to budgeting in that regard, if anything?
I think that's important. I think that it shows that your spouse, that you value them by budgeting that time for them. It's like, you're important to me and you're worth it. So I'm going to sacrifice this time that I could be doing something else because you're important to me and I want to invest in you. And everybody wants to feel valued in their relationship. Yeah.
And, we're not even going to talk about value very deeply, but if you want to value your spouse, this is one of the best ways of doing it, by prioritizing the time that you're going to spend with one another. Now, the next topic, or the next little segment that we wanted to unpack under prioritizing the time is this misconception about men. We expect more of our wife, but invest less than when we were dating. Now, this is something that you brought up, right, honey? That there's this conception that as husbands, we think dating is over. And the idea and concept of dating, that's over. So what were you trying to unpack when you were sharing that idea with me?
But yeah, so I feel like our society has this idea of like, okay, you said yes. She said yes. She's my wife. Okay, now we're going to live happily ever after. But I don't necessarily have to do work to keep her because she said yes. She said yes to me. So we're done, you know? But she said yes to what you were doing when you were dating. You know, she said yes to going out on dates, spending time together, you know, whatever you guys were doing that she fell in love with you for. You can't then be like, okay, well, I'm not that guy anymore because you're my wife now. You know, I feel like you should invest more in her because she's your wife, and not less. There's this thought process of like, okay, she's my wife. So now, you know, do the things that a wife would do, but I can just kind of coast now because you're my wife. And I think that's a fallacy and a trap that devalues our relationships with one another.
Okay. And I think that there's some truth to that, right? We never want to devalue our spouse in any regard. And I think at the same time, we may get caught up in the raft of life, right? So we start going down the river. It's like, hey, you're in the boat with me, so that's good enough. You can see that I'm going through these struggles, so I don't have the time to spend with you. And I think what you're saying here is the pursuit before marriage should continue after marriage on the male's perspective, on the husband's side. Like, we should still continue to woo you, if that's the correct terminology, but we should continue to pursue.
I think that's the right word, is to pursue you, because it doesn't, I'm wooed, that's why I say yes, right? But the pursuing of saying, I'm still in love with you. I still think you're just super awesome, you know? And I'm going to do that by, you know, taking you out on dates because you're my woman and I love you, you know, and you deserve, you know, whether that's, you know, going to Taco Bell because you guys enjoy Taco Bell. It doesn't really make a difference it's not like a money thing. It's just I see you thing and I appreciate you thing. And I think that goes on the wife's side as well. That's not like a one-sided thing, because the wife should do the same.
Yeah, unpack that a little bit. I'm intrigued.
Oh, you like that?
Yeah, unpack, because, you know, what I don't want this to turn into is we're ganging up on the men. Sure. Because that's not the idea behind this, right? It's just to speak truth and to encourage one another, so that way, you know, we can find ways of loving our spouse and building our marriage. So how does that play out, woman, or on the wife's side of this?
The wife's side of investing in her relationship with her husband?
Yeah.
What you mean?
You know, like, okay, let me rephrase the question. What things do wives tend to stop doing in general terms after the marriage is had, like, after you get married? You know, we agree that men stop trying to go on dates, but what do the wives?
Well, I think that a lot of women, well, the sex is probably a big thing, right? Some couples see a decline in that, or intimacy in whatever way, or stop getting dressed or stop showing affection to their spouse. I think that those are some common things that women kind of coast on as well.
Okay. So, and I think that's a fair point, right? We get married, there's a level of attraction that should be maintained. Not to say that you get married just because you're attracted physically, right? There's got to be more to the marriage and more to the attraction, which you touched on was intimacy. And that's also more than sex,
Sure,
right?
of course.
So I think the real key to success there is continue being the same intrigued individual that you were prior to marriage, and the fun of developing the relationship in the way that you did up until the point that you got married should continue on both sides. So whatever that looks like for your marriage, then that's what you should be pursuing.
Yeah, you said that very well.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Complimenting the host. I like it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's how you get points. With all of that said, now as we kind of segue into more practical examples of what it looks like to spend time, right? Because we talked about the philosophy, the importance, so to speak, behind spending time and where those issues kind of come in. So if you've already bought into, I need to spend time with my spouse, well, now it comes down to, well, what do we do when we spend time? And I don't think every couple's going to struggle with this. I think that a lot of couples are already going to know what it is that they can do together, because it's going to be the thing that already drew the two of you together before you got married. So this isn't like a surprise. You can relive all of your date nights of before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you could relive all of your date nights before you got married. That is a very good possibility of developing, a routine. But some of the other things that we talked about were going on hikes. If you're an outdoorsy couple, or if you are even just interested, even a little bit, right? You don't have to be deeply interested in going on hikes. It doesn't have to be a long hike. It could be a short hike. But if this is something that you're into, then you know that you're into it. So go for it. It could be another sort of physical fitness activity, like taking a yoga class together. That could be a thing. What are some other ideas that you would suggest? If your friend was to come to you right now and say, Crystal, I need to know some ideas of what I can do as a date night, what would that be?
Well, I think that I would first ask her what her husband is into, because I noticed that men seem to enjoy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when women take an interest. And I don't mean overpower or, go crazy with it, but just not dismissing whatever their interest is, maybe learn a little bit about it so that they can have a good conversation, or, if that's, I'm sorry. Going to play tennis together, or going to an indoor shooting range, or just being present and being willing. I think that a lot of this comes from just saying yes, I'll do that with you. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah.
Being a willing participant and not being a bore.
So correcting you, no, I think you're right. And I won't speak for all men, because some men, and if you have a husband, and if you are one of the husbands listening to this, and you're like, you know what, I really don't want my wife to take interest in the things that I take interest in, there's probably a deeper concern that you have with your relationship than spending time. And that's probably that you guys are missing each other on a deeper level of connecting. And that connection, it really does come before showing interest in certain things. And there's probably some scars in that relationship that need to be mended. And spending time is one of those ways of fixing it. But sometimes you may need a third-party counselor to come in and kind of intercede on your behalves to help you see what's happening. All right. Now, for me, yes, I do enjoy when you take interest in my particular interests and hobbies. And I think you would reciprocate the same thing, that if I take interest in what you're doing. So the other disclaimer that I want to make is, ladies, don't leave planning the dates always up to your husband. All right. I know that's a public service announcement. You're welcome, husbands out there. But guys, this does not take you or let you off the hook from actually planning something out for your wife. In fact, on the super authoritative dating relationship app TikTok, there's apparently a video where a guy's like, I got plans. He says that he has plans and calls his wife, and she gets all excited. So there's something to that, because apparently, reading through all the comments, the ladies were just like going crazy about how good of a thing that this is. So,
make some plans for your lady.
There you go. Make some plans. All right. So don't be lazy. Make some moves. Make some plans.
Don't be lazy.
You got this. All right. But ladies, make some plans too.
Oh, you like plans?
I like plans.
Okay.
You don't have to do it all the time. I think that, the percentage I won't even offer up in this episode, because I think every relationship is going to be different, based off of how you guys are relating with one another. But I think it should be a shared responsibility. That's just my take. You don't have to agree with me on this, guys. You don't have to agree with me on this, ladies. It's just my take on it and what I would offer up to you as one of the keys. But go ahead.
But could I add to, not necessarily to that point, but some other activities that I think that would be good?
Yeah. More activities.
Activities that people could do. I think getting outdoors is always a good thing. So some fun things, like we went on a nature walk, which was kind of fun, and took some photography, did some photography shoots just with our phones, or that was just a nice thing. I think that sometimes the little things can have a really big impact, as long as you're connecting with your spouse, as long as you're present and you guys are kind of zoned in on each other and kind of tuning out the world, feel like you're teenagers, and just kind of focusing on one another rather than everything else that's happening around you. So Chris mentioned a hike, going out to dinner, of course. What are some things you think would be good?
Cooperative activities. So it could be something as simple as cooking together, right? Yeah, you could cook together. You could do those paint and sip classes. We did a few of those. Things that are cooperative, right? You can even do experimental things where you're blindfolded or one of you are blindfolded, and the other one has to give directions. That not only becomes a communication drill, but you're also spending time. And it also becomes a trust-related drill, because if you can't see what you're doing and, you're listening to your spouse tell you the direction to go, that could be a good opportunity.
But what are you doing?
I don't know. What do you mean, what are you doing?
Like, are you cooking and you can't see?
Nah, don't do that. That's dangerous. That's a bad idea.
Are you painting? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Something that would be not destructive to your home and harmful to your health. Like
blow bubbles.
Well,
what are you doing?
You could be doing a maze, right? Where the worst case scenario, you bump into something, but it's something that's not going to hurt you. Like use some common sense with what you choose here.
I'm just checking.
All right. Yeah. Use some common sense with what it is that you choose to do. But ultimately, you can definitely do something that's cooperative. All right.
Or competitive.
You could do competitive. If that is the relationship MO, then absolutely you should do something competitive because you guys are both going to enjoy that. The goal is to do something that you enjoy. And if you don't know what you enjoy, then start doing stuff to figure out what you enjoy doing together.
Sure.
Like, there is not a couple under the sun that can't find something that they enjoy doing together. You just may have to go under a lot of suns to figure this out, right? That for those of you who don't get that, that's many days. It may take some time to find the thing. That's what I'm trying to say. All right. So we've said enough on examples. You have more on examples?
No, you're fine.
Oh, okay. All right. So as we kind of bring this podcast back to a more serious and landing the plane, the concept of spending time is all about the quality of the time that you're spending. It's important to make note of what type of time you're spending and what you're doing, because if you're just sitting at the house watching a TV show, that's cool. That may be good. That may work sometimes. But over time, that may not be the best quality opportunity to spend with your spouse. So the goal here and with quality time, especially if this is a love language of your spouse, I would say in the top 3, and there's 5 of them if you're not familiar with love languages. But if this is scored really high on your spouse's love language quiz, then you should definitely be looking at finding ways of spending quality time. All right. Quality time really does have one key factor to it, and that is planning. We've already made jokes about, men saying plans, but moral of the story, you don't spend quality time without a level of planning. And that planning could just be as simple as putting it onto the calendar and saying, hey, this day we're doing something. And you may not know what that thing is up until the morning of that day. Hey, that's perfectly fine. But as long as a couple, you agree that this is something that you're going to do and you're going to prioritize it, then go for it. Well, what would you say to that in regards to having plans and quality time?
Put it on the calendar.
You can't say what I said. See, over here stealing my answers. If this was a test,
I zoned out.
she would be looking at my test sheet right now.
I zoned out. Just cut this part out.
I'm not cutting this out. They gonna know. You tried to take my answer.
I zoned out a little bit.
You weren't even paying attention to me.
Sorry. It's late. I was listening because you said put it on the calendar, and you might not know what you're going to do that day until that morning, but that's okay. I didn't hear. I don't know.
Did you just say a poem or a rhyme?
No, I just said what you just said. I restated because I was listening, but I don't know what you're asking me.
What is the difference between spending time and spending quality time?
I wish we were on video so that they could see your body language there. That was pretty hilarious. So I think the difference between spending time is you guys are together. When you're spending time, you're just together in the same place, okay? But you can be spending time together in a car and driving to the movie theater or a restaurant and nobody is talking to each other. You're together, so you're spending time. But you're not connecting, you're not interacting, you're not present in that actual moment. So when it's quality time, then, nobody's, scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. You guys are paying attention to one another and listening and being present. Eye contact is happening. You're having a good time. You're laughing together.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And you know, I think what I took away from what you were saying is quality time is making a connection. Spending time is existing in the same place with the other person.
Sure. Yep.
So we want less of just existing in the place and more of creating and nurturing a connection between each other.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, we unpacked quite a bit and we horsed around a little bit. So I'll give a very quick recap to the success for spending time with your spouse. The first one is you have to prioritize it. It's got to be on the calendar. It's got to be protected. Don't let anything intrude. This also means children's activities. Now, I will give the disclaimer. If it is an activity that your child, you've already agreed to do, then speak with your spouse. Make sure that you guys re-plan whatever the day is that's being intruded upon. But make sure that you don't let your children become a hindrance to you spending time with your spouse. It's so important that you invest that with your spouse. All right. So prioritize the time. The next one, do something that is cooperative, something that is exciting, something that you both enjoy. And if you don't have something that you enjoy doing together, experiment with things, not drugs. Experiment with opportunities to
drugs.
Experiment with things and see what it is that you can do together as a couple. And then last but absolutely not least is make the time memorable, make it quality or qualitative. That's a word.
Hey, you guys post down in the comments if qualitative, if he used it in the right
Hey.
If he used it in the right context, because I don't think he used it in the right context. But just let us know down below if he did or if he did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if it's qualitative, I'm standing by that. All right. Moral of the story. Look, quality time, spend it. Make sure that you're making connections and not just existing in the place that you are hanging out with your spouse. Don't just breathe, like actually connect. So with all that to say, I hope you guys understand the importance of spending time together as a couple. And until the next time, I want you guys to find a way to love your spouse every day. Peace out.